Welcome to Search Talk Live with search engine optimization and marketing experts Robert O'Haver and Matt Weber. Powered by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Search Talk Live. I'm your host, Robert O'Haver, along with Matt Weber of Roar Internet Marketing. Matt?
Yeah, great to be here. I hope this show doesn't involve a lot of moving around today because I still got the Thanksgiving fullness taken over me.
Yeah, we got some exciting news I wanted to share with everybody because I was just doing the math on the numbers, and we've actually hit exactly, let's see what it is. We've hit over 6,000 downloads and plays of the show, which is, to me, that's a milestone.
It is, and to me, it means that we're bringing value.
Not 6,000. I said 60. I'm sorry. 60,000.
60,000. That means we're bringing value. That means folks are getting some tips out of the shows, and they're putting them to work, and they're making their sites better because of the content of the show.
Yeah, I want to believe that.
Yeah. Well, no reason for them to come back if it weren't true.
Yeah, and then we're just 50 people away that with hitting 8,000 followers on Spreaker, which is just one of our platforms we're on. You can catch the show on iTunes, iHeartRadio if you're in the U.S. You name it, we're pretty much on it, except for Spotify. We're still working on that.
So if you're listening, find 50 of your closest friends and get them to download the show, or get them to follow us on Spreaker, and we'll get over that number.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So grab your pen and paper or get in front of your computer and start taking notes. We've got some great. We have a great guest today. Be sure if you have questions and you have questions that you hear on the show, that something that sparks a question in your mind, you can go to Twitter and type in hashtag Search Talk Live. Again, that's hashtag Search Talk Live on Twitter, and we will answer your question live on the air, or the guest will.
And let's emphasize that, because today's show is about a fairly revolutionary concept.
Yeah.
It's something that most folks have not been exposed to before, and I got to believe it's going to generate some questions.
I think so, because, I mean, it's kind of a opposite way of thinking on approach, you know?
It is. It's a disruption. It's going to be a disruption to a lot of people out there that are marketing B2B services or SaaS products. This show is going to be a little bit of a mind bender.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to mention that go to searchtalklive.com, sign up for a newsletter, because that way you'll get any updates on up-and-coming shows that are coming. I do want to announce on, what did I say, January, did I say 9th? Yes, January 9th is our 100th episode. Woo! We're going to have...
Look out, Simpsons.
Yeah, we're going to have a special guest, Brian Dean from Backlinko. He's going to be on the show. He's going to talk about his skyscraper methodology. That's a tongue twister. And a bunch of other things. That should be exciting. But today, let's get down to it. Our guest is Kevin Indig. He is with... Oh, man, I'm going to mess this up. Athasian. Sorry, I can't talk today. Athasian. Is that correct?
I would say it's Atlassian, but you can call it.
Okay. Sorry.
You can call it that.
I told you.
No worries, man.
The king of it. I'm the king of butchering names. So I want to thank you for being on the show first off, and I want to, if you could tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm super pumped. I was listening to a couple of your past episodes, and I listened to the end of all of them, which is not normal for me when I listen to podcasts. So congrats to hitting your milestone.
Thank you.
So yeah, my name is Kevin Indig. I'm running technical SEO at Atlassian, and I'm a startup mentor at the German Accelerator, which is a startup accelerator here in the Silicon Valley. So I was originally, so I grew up and was born in Germany, but I live here in the US in the Silicon Valley. And I do my thing here. So that's me in a nutshell.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, sure. So Atlassian, that's actually a very good question. I should explain that because I didn't know the brand before I joined the company either, to be very honest. So Atlassian, we make software products like Jira, Trello, HipChat, Bitbucket, Confluence, and a whole lot of other products. And we're not only famous for our products, but we're also famous a little bit for our business model, which is a little unusual compared to the other ones in the SaaS or B2B space. Mm-hmm. And that business model is called land and expand, and it basically works without salespeople.
Now that's big.
Yeah.
Right? The title of a book, The Death of a Salesman, is flashing in front of my eyes here. So you've got a lot of folks listening to the show right now and going, wait a minute, how do you sell a product or a service without salespeople? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. There are a couple of components to mention. So first, what is land and expand in a nutshell? It's basically the idea of going from a single person in a company that you want to sell your product to the whole team, to the department, to the whole company, right? It's, if you would want to explain it in a vicious way, you would say it's like a virus that spreads throughout the company, your product that is. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting because we're not the only company that follow that business model. There are others as well. Some of them which like Slack, Basecamp. There are a couple of smaller ones like Splunk, Yammer, DocuSign. And then Dropbox, I think, until recently scaled with that business model as well. And it is opposed to the traditional approach of B2B, which is to have a sales team and then to address the CTO or even the CEO of a company. And the opposite is the bottom-up approach that I just outlined, right? And there are a couple of requirements that you need to have. The three main things that have to be in order, and that are market, products, and product market fit. So to explain that on a high level, starting with product market fit, that's a term from the startup world, and it basically describes the point at which you have built something that customers really love, mm-hmm. right? It's that point where you see that exponential growth, that hockey stick kind of curve. You have high retention, and basically, you create something of value that the market has adopted. Sure. But there are also the two other components, which are market and product, and they're a little more comprehensive. So we cannot explain them in simply one sentence, but obviously it's very, very heavy driven by inbound marketing. And sure. That goes back to the idea that the B2B and B2C space are going more and more into the same direction. They're almost the same, right? It's something that a lot of people don't talk about that much, but that I think is everybody kind of senses that, right? So I find it hilarious when people come or marketers come to the office and they create this refined, amazing strategy for B2B and think that people are not susceptible to regular B2C marketing, right? So we're all regular people. We go home at night, we watch YouTube, we have Instagram on our phones. It doesn't matter if we're, B2B decision makers or if we're regular consumers. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a trend that allows companies to follow a more B2C targeted marketing approach in a B2B environment.
Okay. Kevin, let me ask you, now, the examples you gave me were all SaaS companies. Is this more geared toward a SaaS type platform or business?
Well, it's best feasible with, let's put it this way, with a target group that is at least, a little present in the online world. Mm-hmm. So if your customers are completely offline, very conservative, then this does not work for you. Mm-hmm. That's right. So it has to be some online affinity.
So how do you find that, to make this technique work, how do you find that first user that's going to help you spread the message up in the organization?
Yeah, that's a perfect question. And so obviously the approach that you want to follow is inbound marketing focused because, and I think I remember a study from Google that's actually already a couple years old. I think it's from 2013 or 14, where they say that 57% of people in the B2B space or of decision makers, they do a whole bunch of research before they even get in touch with the brand that they want to buy a product from. Mm-hmm. And that research is your open door for that approach of land and expand and basically inbound marketing to that person. Right? So obviously SEO is a huge component. It's also a huge driver of customer acquisition for Atlassian and for Slack and for Basecamp. There are numerous examples from, the Slack apps, which are ranking pretty well on Google, to microsites that we at Atlassian build around certain topics, to the Basecamp blog. I think it's called Medium versus Noise. So the whole plethora of approaches, but they all funnel into the common inbound or pull marketing channels, which are SEO, email, social media marketing, and then stuff like podcasts and influencer marketing.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now you've got this one user. You found him, you've hooked him. He's the one, let's just say it's a SaaS product, and he's the one project manager within an organization that has 10 project managers, and he's using it. How do you get him or her to evangelize your product? Because what if he just stays pretty content with him being successful and the product meets his personal needs? How do you encourage him or her to step outside that and spread the word?
Right. Another great question. And the answer is network effects. So there are different types of network effects, but I'm talking about those that are in your product. So your product should solve small problems for a single person or a small team, but it also should solve big problems for a whole company, right? So I think Jira is a perfect example, or let's take something like Trello, right? You can use Trello for your personal organization. You can even use it to, for your grocery list or, stuff like that. But you can also use it to organize or plan your own projects. But the real power of those products comes into play when you invite other people to collaborate with you. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about network effects. It's those synergies that pop up when you use the product with other people. And that obviously can expand to the whole company, but it usually spreads, from person to team to other teams to departments and then throughout the whole company. And it's very interesting that all of these SaaS products that are successful have certain network effects. Now, we can obviously become very technical with how these networks are structured, but there are two basic types. And the one type is a homogeneous network, which is something like Slack. Slack has only Slack users connected to each other. And then there are heterogeneous networks, something like Zapier, that connects users to different apps. And I don't want to go too deep at this point, unless you want me to, into the science behind networks and network effects. But basically, the reason for a single user to spread that product is that the product becomes more valuable the more people use it.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the product itself has to be partially configured in order to be able for this technique to work. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. That's why I mentioned that as one of the three components in the beginning or as a requirement for a land and expand, right? It's the market, it's product market fit, and it's the product. And that is one of the most important aspects of this whole strategy within the product, the network effects.
Robert, I've got a quick question. I've noticed that some of the examples that you gave, Kevin, I think I've seen some of those brands use AdWords on competitor terms. Is that a strategy of inbound marketing that works well to trap that one user that's going to begin to evangelize?
I think that's a little gray zone, especially when it comes to bidding on competitor terms. I'm not sure how the legalities are. We generally shy away or try not to do that too much. But I would also, not include paid marketing too much in inbound marketing. I would say that's more of a push channel, which definitely has its value as well, and can, of course, also work with the land and expand strategy. But I honestly have to say I don't have too much experience with bidding on competitors' terms to foster that product adoption.
Okay. Kevin, let me ask you, I guess, are you using organic to find that initial user, or how is that starting for you? If you're actually reaching out to CEOs and stuff like that, or?
So the answer is we don't reach out actively to people. We use organic search a lot to help people in the first place. And for example, at Atlassian, we use so-called microsites for that. And a microsite is an environment or a set of pages that is focused on a specific topic and is a little further away from the layout and design of the website, right? And so, for example, we at Atlassian, we have a microsite around the topic of Git, right? Git is a huge topic for engineers and developers, and we have a microsite that explains all processes, has tutorials, is purely informational driven, but we don't push our brand at all. We don't try to sell to people at all. It is pure delivery of value, and our intent. I mean, of course, we also want to spread good information. We want to help people actually. But we also, that strategy also helps to get people in a funnel, to get your brands on their radar in the first place, right? Especially in a world that is so crowded with different brands and content and everybody tries to sell to you. It is a very nice and passive way to get people familiar with your brand. And from there, we can then, once they have a specific need, we can then bring them back and address that need with more transactional content where we might tease or push our products.
So is that microsite branded at all with that solution?
It is branded a little bit, but very, very passively.
And as they're interacting with the content, how are you trapping their information to be able to market to them in the future?
Yeah, also a very good question. Obviously, we do some, we attach some cookies to some users, but it's less of a retargeting play. It's more a play of understanding how useful that content is for those users. We have we put in a lot of effort to figure out how long people stay on our microsites, how many pages they click, how quickly they bounce, how often they return, right? So the number one goal with this is to foster something that is the number one address for any question around that topic that those users have.
I see.
So your first step really, and I want to put words in your mouth, is to really understand what are your target prospects' problems, what are they trying to solve, what are their challenges, and then you're creating online content that speaks to those challenges.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So I'm interacting with your content on the microsite. I kind of know it's your organization. You're putting a cookie on my device. And then what are you doing next to get me to connect with you?
Right. So there are a couple of ways. I already mentioned social media and email. And basically, email is a little more efficient in getting people into what I call a closed environment, right? And basically getting people into an environment that you can control and where you can better measure the effects and what your users do. And email is one of those environments where you can send very targeted messages to the people. You can send them special offers. You can have them sign up. You can engage them. There's all kinds of possibilities. And by the way, I don't think that email is dead. I read that, I read that a lot these days. And I think actually it's one of the most underrated channels out there. Most companies just don't do it very well to say it, to say it very straightforward.
SEO is dead too.
Yeah. You know what, Robert, I actually hope that SEO is dead. Very honestly. I say that as an SEO guy. I really hope that SEO is dead because that means that way fewer people will do it. And that means, there's a bigger piece of the pie for me because I know that it works.
Right.
So, that's a little reference
Spread
to
the word.
Thanksgiving.
Spread the word. It's dead.
How are you capturing my email address on the microsite?
Yeah, that's obviously from an opt-in process where people can sign up. But that's exactly the point, right? We don't have to do anything funky to get people's email addresses. It's just enough to deliver them value in an honest way, and then you have people's trust, right? And they trust you with their email, and they trust you to not spam them or just try to upsell them or sell them in the first place. They believe you that you want to help them out in the first place, and then talk about transaction later.
You're making an offer of additional, more valuable content in order for me to give up my email address.
Exactly. Our newsletters, and we have several ones, for Jira or for Trello, they're very, very, very informational driven. We hardly ever, send those typical drip campaigns where, I don't know, we just try to make you offers until you buy something from us. they're very, very informational driven. So we curate a lot of helpful content that our users are interested in. So everything around teamwork, anything that's connected or related to our product.
Is it like you offer maybe offers like try it before you buy it type of thing, like a
That is another component of the whole of the product and of the business model, which is freemium, right? Mm-hmm. First user free. So if you are a single user, you can use most of our products, I think almost all of them, for free. And then if you want to invite your colleagues, that's when you have to start, paying a small sum of money. And then it obviously scales the more colleagues you invite or the more people use it.
Okay, so land and expand is really about being a helpful partner to the people that you identify as target prospects, which sounds like the very first step in the land and expand strategy is you got to know who your prospects are.
Oh, so much. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it makes perfect sense, and I don't want to become too philosophical, but just to go on a slight tangent, it makes perfect sense in this, world of content abundance and attention scarcity, right? Everything is competing for our attention nowadays, whether it's cell phone or people or apps or whatever have you. And we're very adverse to sales, right? We're very adverse to being sold to. And the only strategy that really stands out in this world is to actually help people to provide a lot of content and a lot of value upfront for free. And then when people have further needs or specific needs, to then say, okay, but at this point, we have to talk about buying.
Yeah, this is a big shift. I mean, even larger from this conversation, from an online perspective, so many people are still in the mindset of when I talk about my prospects, I talk about their age and their gender and where they live. Today, you really got to talk about your prospects in terms of their vocabulary, their challenges, their problems. What are they trying to solve? That's the new language to describe prospects. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the nice thing is you can do that in a quantified, data-driven way, right? One example is we know the search volume of different keywords in SEO. Very, very applicable and very, very tangible. It's not something that we have to be, that we have to think about too much or be too creative about. It's clearly, backed up with numbers.
Sure. Now, one advantage that you might have with a SaaS product, I would say, is, at least once a month, I have someone ask me about a project management tool or, a communication tool. And I imagine you get a lot of word of mouth naturally with people using, obviously if your product's good,
Right, but you got that recommendation factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, word of mouth is big. I think that's another version of the network effects is that people not only invite their colleagues, but they also talk about your product if it really helps them out,
sure.
Right? And we can measure that in the search volume, for example, for our brand. We can even look at that on a per country or per city basis on tools like Google Trends. So we have very clear ideas of the potential of our word of mouth across the world. And that obviously is a huge driver, from very specific situations like brand recognition in the Google search results pages to very intangible situations of, people just talking to each other in the same space.
Yeah. And that could also work both ways. If you suck, people share it too.
Right. No question. And probably more so.
Right.
Yeah. So the land and expand strategy, Kevin, if you had to just kind of highlight in your mind, what are the two data points that you think have made this strategy work? What does your team talk about most often? What are those key metrics that are the ones you focus on in determining whether or not the strategy is working?
Well, one of the factors is our we have different metrics that we measure, right? There's this common SaaS metric, which is monthly active users, right? So we basically want to know how many people are using our product at least once a month. Also look at daily active users, which gives us a little more, minutia or a little more details about when and how often people use the product. So I think that's one very important aspect. But then also, of course, we have core metrics or KPIs for each of our products, which are different a little bit, but we basically look at the activity of our users in the product. So for example, I know that to also, talk about another company, not only us, I know, for example, that Slack is measuring very deliberately how many messages every team sends on a daily basis. And there's a fun fact that Slack, for example, found out that if teams send about 2,000 messages total, then 90% of those teams, they're more likely to use the product, basically forever, or stick to the product to really adopt it throughout the whole company. So every product has slightly different metrics, but they all revolve around activity and usage.
On the inbound side, on the land and expand strategy, are you looking at whether or not the landing pages convert? What's the key metric on the inbound side?
Yeah. So we basically look at leads and signups, right? So basically how many people sign up to try out our products, or then eventually to upgrade to a paid version, for example, if a whole team adopts it. But those are the hard business metrics. Of course, they stand above all the other ones. But we also look at returning visitors. We look at stuff like bounce rate, dwell time, and then obviously the traffic that we get from all the different channels. I already mentioned that, for example, organic or SEO delivers tons of traffic. It's a very, very big pillar in our strategy total. But we try to keep that somewhat balanced, and balance obviously is a relative term, but we try to not rely too much on one channel.
Gotcha. With that being said, we have to take a break real quick. Hold on. Oops.
Companies.com for more information.
Find the true value of your home when you log on. Homevalue.com.
Get your questions in on Twitter. Type hashtag #SearchTalkLive and your question. Now back to the show.
All right, we're back. Let's see. We got any questions on Twitter? Not yet, no.
Kevin, the land and expand strategy seems like where the revolution has happened is we've, in essence, traded the skills and competency of salespeople for the skills and competencies of content writers. Would you agree?
I would agree. The thing is, people hearing this might think that I think that sales is not necessary anymore, or that sales is stupid. And I want to make very clear that I don't think that, and I don't want to promote that. All I want to promote is this alternative way that is applicable for most companies. But to be fair, there are certain companies that have to have salespeople, right? So it usually correlates with the pricing and the complexity of the product, right? So if we imagine you had a graph in front of you, right, and on the y-axis you would have the sales that you need, and on the x-axis you would have the customer lifetime value, then you would see that, companies with a very low-touch sales model like Dropbox or MailChimp, for example, they're not very complex. You can self-serve, and they're not very expensive. And on the other line of the spectrum, you have companies like Oracle or IBM, right? And their companies are way more complex. And it's impossible for a user to completely research everything on her own or on his own and understand it and then buy this product. So what that means is, if tomorrow there is a weird virus that breaks out that affects only salespeople, then Oracle and IBM are going down hard within 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like it's sales is such a substantial part of their business that there's no way for them to work around that. Now, there's a third category of those companies that rely on salespeople. Otherwise, there's no way for them to exist. And that are companies like Palantir or SpaceX. And they obviously sell to the government, right? So they have only a single customer or a single client. And they have only one salesperson, and that is Peter Thiel for Palantir or Elon Musk for SpaceX. Now, obviously, SpaceX has a couple smaller clients as well. I don't want to say they sell only to the government, but you get the idea. They have one or a few huge customers, and obviously without their main salesperson, which is the CEO, there's no way for them to survive either. So much about the spectrum.
Let's see if we can real world it a little bit just for some of the folks listening. Let's say that there's a commercial cleaning service out there, and they clean office buildings, and their target customer is property managers for office buildings. Where does the land and expand strategy fit for them as you see it?
Yeah. Obviously, without all the numbers and thinking about it for a little longer, we have to be a little hypothetical here. But it all starts with understanding the market and the product, right? And when we talk about those aspects, we obviously we have to speak about the target group, right? So what are the core problems and what are people searching for? What is the basic value of a customer? Right, and that helps you to guide your whole strategy. So when I talk about value of a customer, I specifically talk about CAC or customer acquisition cost, right? Which is then connected to the lifetime value of the customer. So you basically want to know how much money can I make from a single customer, and then what would be a good strategy to get to that customer. So where do those people hang out? Where do they spend time, and how do they usually find their service? So I would just, from gut feeling, first look at, is there any, what are keywords that those people would be searching for? Maybe it's something like office cleaning, right? And then get a better understanding of that whole kind of space, as of where are those, where those topics discussed? Is there something on Reddit, on Quora, or somewhere else where it can really, embrace that whole topic and can figure out all the different problems that are connected to office cleaning, right? Maybe it's only about finding people. Maybe it's a pricing issue, but maybe it's also something else like, I don't know, every office has a different carpet and it's really hard to clean that carpet or something specific. So after delving into that whole space and understanding the actual problems, then I can go out and create content to actually address those problems and get into that whole space.
Yeah, so it comes back to, again, understanding what the challenges are. And what tools do you use? You talked a little bit about keyword research. But beyond that, is there another place that you go to understand what questions people use to seek answers to their problems?
Yeah, it's funny, especially in that initial or at that starting point, when I try to understand a topic or a market from scratch, there's a lot of manual research that goes into it, right? Sorry, please go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. I was going to say, those little 8 balls, you shake them and... Yeah. Just kidding.
Yeah, it's...
Sorry.
No worries. It's a fair argument. That's one of the best tactics out there. But no, seriously, it's a lot of manual research in the beginning, trying to find forums or distinct places, subreddits, Quora discussions, just to get an initial idea. And then when it comes to keyword research, obviously there's a whole, bunch of tools from SEMrush to Ahrefs, there's search metrics, there's Systrix, that we like to use and just, quantify that. I love to use Ubersuggest and Answer the Public just to get, more questions that could make sense. Moz obviously comes to mind, right? And, it's the standard keyword research procedure that we follow to get a first initial picture. But I think what's different than in that whole land and expand approach, or to advance that a little bit, is to map that to the user journey, right? To just very straight. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm becoming a fan of AnswerThePublic.com, and you went through a couple tools pretty quickly there, and that one stood out to me as I was listening to you because I'm becoming a fan of that. It really does the best job to me of digesting it in question form, and it clusters the questions by a common syntax.
Oh, okay.
And so to me, it saves a little bit of work over Ahrefs, for example, on that. And, of course, I think the guy whose picture is on AnswerThePublic.com is pretty funny looking too. He makes me laugh. But that's a valuable tool. to me. And when you look at those questions, you start getting an understanding of the problems that they're trying to solve on that. So it's more than just seeing the words in front of you. Yes, they ask this question. It really does help me understand the mindset and the context of the user as they're trying to solve that particular problem.
Well, so much.
Yeah.
So much.
Not to get off topic, but I wanted to ask you, do you see mobile as well, like mobile versus desktop? Versus...
It doesn't that I'm aware of. Answer the Public doesn't. Do any of the tools, Kevin, that you're familiar with allow you to segment the data by mobile versus desktop?
No, not that I know. I can't really think of that. No.
Okay, so we just developed a product idea right here on Search Talk Live. Somebody's writing that down somewhere.
Because there is differences,
Oh, there definitely is. And now look at voice search.
Yeah.
I think that's where we got to understand, how do people express themselves when they're talking into a device versus how do they express themselves when they've got their fingers on a keyboard? It's got to be different.
Yeah.
So much. That's going to be a huge topic. Don't want to go too much of a tangent.
Yes,
I just think that voice is going to be major, especially for e-commerce and all that kind of stuff. But for one thing I love about Answer the Public is that you get that huge roundhouse kick of different questions and different rabbit holes that you can then follow on. And then one thing I do usually with all the stuff from Answer the Public is first I type in some questions that I found to Answer the Public in the first place again in the tool. And so I try to follow all the different corners. But I also take the time to then map those questions and those keywords that I find to the different stages of the user journey, right? And those are typically that the first stage is that the user is aware that he has a problem, and then he becomes aware of potential solutions. He then compares the different solutions and then makes a decision. But even after he made that decision to buy, there are certain needs that he might have. Just think of something like assembling IKEA furniture, right? Once I bought that furniture, I still, sometimes need to figure out how to put it together. And you find out there's even more of that need in the B2B space where people try to understand software and how it works, or if they have problems, right, which is the whole after-sales conundrum where people, might have a different need for the correct setups, support, exactly, all these kind of things, right? So there are different stages in that user journey, and with Answer the Public, you can, find out different questions and needs that people have, but I think it's then important to map that down to different stages and then create content for each different stage.
Well said. I like that.
Kevin, talk to us a little bit about how you made the decision to use a microsite strategy versus landing page. And I totally understand the example you gave about GitHub. You did some good research and found out that your users have a common behavior. They use GitHub, so you decided to be a subject matter expert on GitHub and produce valid content on GitHub. Is there another example where you've used landing pages to execute the land and expand strategy, or is it can only be served by microsites?
No, we also have a couple of landing pages, and we make the decision based on a very simplified content funnel is what we call it, right? And there are 3 stages. It's very simple. The top stage is what's called TOFU, or top of the funnel, and that's only informational searches that people have. They have, think back of the user journey. They don't have any need to buy anything yet. The middle of the funnel, obviously called MOFU, is where people are aware that they have a problem, but they're still comparing different solutions to that problem. And then obviously the bottom of the funnel, BOFU, is where they know exactly what they want, and now they just need to find it. And so we spread our content throughout these 3 stages, and I would say that microsites are the best fit for the top of the funnel, whereas a landing page is probably best suited for the middle of the funnel, right? And for example, we have landing pages where we address so-called versus queries or comparison queries that people search for. And that could be something like Jira versus Trello. Well, not anymore since we bought Trello, but something like Jira versus Asana, or Jira versus Basecamp, or all these comparisons. And those are best addressed by landing pages.
Boy, that's an interesting technique. I think if you've ever shopped for a car, the car manufacturers have gotten into that with landing pages that are designed to get those comparison queries. Because if your product or service involves comparison queries, you've got to really tackle that subject head on, and you've got to grab that user.
And I think that's missed quite a bit too.
Yes.
By SEOs.
Yeah. Yep. And even for a phrase like the a competitor to, people will search the phrase a competitor to blank, fill in the blank on that. And that's an opportunity to use the strategy as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are two things that people usually compare online. The one thing is brands and the other thing is products, right? So when we talk about people not knowing yet which solution to go with, that means they can compare your brand, or they can compare different products entirely.
Yeah, I'm just really interested by the GitHub example, and then to understand what other common behavior do your prospects have that you can exploit to be a subject matter expert on? Because our first reaction is to think about producing content about ourselves and to think about podcasts. Yeah, right. So I
videos.
think I think the great takeaway for the audience is the less you talk about yourself and the more you talk about what your prospect is trying to achieve, the better you are to be able to use the strategy that Kevin is advocating.
Absolutely.
But you got to be able to step outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Especially companies have to. The pace is only getting faster, and you have to be very creative, but also open-minded in what your go-to-marketing strategy looks like. And there are a couple of companies that do that really well. So, for example, Intercom, they also have a podcast that they do really well, and there's this addressed specifically to their audience, but also Basecamp has a podcast called the Rework Podcast, where they address all of their topics, which are, around work and growth of companies. And then we have, things like Whiteboard Friday from Moz, which...
There you go. Wow, what a great example.
Yeah, but it's so, for us, because we're used to it. I mean, Brent is doing this for, I think, over 10 years, which is insane, right? And kudos at this point. But if you think about it, I would say Moz is a SaaS company, right? It's a B2B company, and they use content and educating. I mean, in every aspect of their go-to-marketing strategy, you find inbound, right? They have their blog, which is just as successful, and it fits perfectly into that approach of delivering content or value first and educating and informing your audience, and then, asking for money very late. So I think podcast, video marketing. And we've very successfully also experimented even with influencer marketing, something that most B2B companies would never dare thinking about because it's such a B2C topic, right? So I think all these barriers are now falling apart.
Yeah, the whiteboards are a great example. Now, it's really closely related to their product.
Sure. Whereas
the GitHub example that you offered, Kevin, you've taken a topic that your users participate in, but it's not your core deliverable.
Yes, absolutely. And I would even argue that if you look at the Whiteboard Friday videos closely, Rand Fishkin actually doesn't tease Moz too much, right? You don't, when you look at the video, when you watch the videos, you don't feel like you're being sold to. You feel like you're being educated.
It's a very natural transition,
Yes, 100%. And I think that transition is what B2B companies and especially SaaS companies really, really have to embrace. Same goes for social media. I think there's this common notion or idea that social media is not a B2B play, but I think it more stems from from companies not having found the right fit yet, right? From companies just shouting their product into the world too much and not helping people enough. So there are all kinds of creative ways to approach social media that actually work. One example that comes to mind is Slack's so-called Wall of Love, where they pinned, that's on Twitter, by the way, and they pinned users' tweets to their profile that praised the product. And I found that was a very, cute way of saying, hey, you're important to us. But, also the things that you share, right? So, again, when we look at what we at Atlassian share most on social media, it's usually informative, educational articles, and hardly ever is it a tease for our products.
Yeah. I mean, there's a good argument there because, for example, Twitter. I mean, what's behind a company? People. CEOs, VPs, all that stuff. If you know how to get to them,
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And you can spin that even further. So there's another marketing construct that fits very well into this whole idea, and that's the idea or the concept of a marketing flywheel. Mm-hmm. And the marketing flywheel's idea is that you build some sort of ecosystem across different marketing channels that sustain each other. And I want to explain what I mean by that. So say you have a microsite that is mostly fed by organic traffic from SEO.
Sure.
Then you have people sign up for your newsletter there. So you have them on the next channel. And then throughout the newsletter, you might, promote them to follow you on social media. And then on social media, you engage them to go through your microsite again, or to even backlink to your microsite, right? And that increased traffic and brand recognition and backlinks would then strengthen that microsite in rankings again. So it's some sort of wheel that spins, that takes a little effort in the beginning to set up, but once it's spinning, you just have to feed it a little bit with less effort, but it's still sustaining itself.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
Thank you.
All right, so we got about 14 minutes.
Yeah, this is a really great topic to really change the sales paradigm and think about things from attracting and being magnetic as opposed to pushing and all those old cliches that we grew up with, sell by the pound. And, now we're talking about value and bringing raw value to our prospects and being magnetic and having them come to us. Mm-hmm. It's the difference of being chasing after prospects and having the prospects come to you.
It's selling without selling.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Now, I got to ask you, Kevin, because you've done a great job explaining the technique, and it is primarily dependent on SEO. Can you share with us what you think are your maybe 2 or 3 most overlooked SEO tips that you're using well that perhaps the average person isn't using as well as you are?
The best SEO tips or maybe tactics. Well, I think, we talked about content a lot. I think one lever that I love to pull is more on the technical side, and that is related to internal linking. Don't want to go so stop me if I go too technical, but I think setting internal links, relevant internal links from pages on your site that already acquired a lot of links in the first place has a huge impact on ranking of that page, right? You don't have to, again, I think there's this kind of automated or scaled way where you have a program do that for you, but you can also manually do that, and I think that's usually sufficient. And then when it comes, the second thing that I would mention, when it comes to identifying topics that, you want to rank for or that you might not have on your radar yet, I think platforms like Reddit are a great way. You can, for example, see in a subreddit what the top posts are since the creation of that subreddit, right? So you get a good idea of what those people are interested in, but also what works well. You have that kind of pre-verified or pre-confirmed topic that you can then create content for. And, if you're really lucky that content isn't covered with content very well, and you can very simply, just go ahead and collect all the answers from that subreddit and mix it together to create the best content that's out there for that topic.
So you think a lot of people don't execute their internal links well?
Yeah, I think there's just so much more potential, because the thing is, for a couple of years, link building is this thing that has become, very, very difficult and is not, as easy to scale as, say, 5 years ago. So a lot of SEOs shy away from that, but why not use the links that I already have better in the first place, right? And that's where I think of internal linking, to just better distribute the links that I already get. And that obviously, takes a little work in identifying first which pages on my site get links and which of those are good, and, which of those makes sense. But then in the second place, go ahead and see where can I better distribute that link juice, that incoming link power throughout my site.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to laugh, but a lot of people miss the low-hanging fruit too. I mean, I don't know if you agree with me on that, but, stuff that's ranking on page 2 or stuff like, going after that stuff that is missed so much,
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. And especially in the B2B space, which is sometimes very, very competitive, it makes sense to first look at what do I actually have before looking at what else should I get, right? And it's the same with keywords, as you just mentioned. Look at which keywords are you ranking for on position 11 to 20, and is there maybe something that you could tweak on your site, maybe the meta title, or maybe setting internal links that could help that keyword jump up on the first page.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's time for Believe It or Leave It.
I think so.
All right, Kevin, believe it or leave it, we give you a statement that we found on the internet, and we're going to ask you to tell our audience whether they should believe it or whether they should leave it. Are you ready?
All right, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay, number 1, marketing automation is a requirement for any successful inbound marketing program.
Leave it.
Really?
That's very quick. Yeah, I would say leave it.
Tell us more about that, because you just surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm sure I did. And the reason, so basically, I think the requirement is what I do not agree with. I think marketing automation can be very valuable. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I think there are lots of other ways to go, right? Obviously, marketing automation has a big buzz right now, and it's very popular. But when I look at the success stories of lots of big brands, I often see that they did something that does not scale. And I think that marketing automation is one way where people think, I just do this one thing and I never have to think about it again. And that's where I would, that's what I don't agree with.
Okay, so it's got its place, but it's not a requirement.
Correct.
Okay.
Do I have the wrong list here?
No, you have the right one.
Okay.
You got number 2.
I'm like, oh, crap. No. All right. So the type of SSL key, domain validated, organization validated, validated or extended validation will become a ranking factor.
Yeah, I struggle with that a little bit. It's funny because I just recently tweeted about that. I say believe it.
Okay.
But it's, I want to explain my reasoning a little bit behind that, right? So
sure.
I read a lot of those ranking factor studies from vendors because I believe that they have the biggest pool of data and can make
sure.
the best assumptions about what really works out there. And a lot of them say that HTTPS is becoming a rank or is already a ranking factor.
Sure.
Google even says that. Now, we're now at a point where I think 50% of search results feature URLs that are on HTTPS. And I'm asking myself, is that a correlation or is it a causation, right? So that which is always the question in SEO and any ranking factors, right? I don't want to beat that horse anymore, but again, not denying that HTTPS has a value. I think everybody should move to HTTPS because the benefits are huge.
Sure.
I just doubt that this will move the needle a lot. I think this is something that when companies or brands think about how to squeeze out the last 5% of optimization, then HTTPS, is a valid idea. But I think, if you look at it purely from an SEO perspective, before using HTTPS to improve your rankings, there's so many other things that you should do. I think that's where I'm hesitating a little bit.
Yeah, you should be ranking first. I mean, not first like first place, but I mean, your site should be ranking, period, before you even think about it.
Right, you got to think about it. For the audience may not know that there's different types of SSL keys.
Yeah, I mean, you're on page 3. You're not going to end up on page 1 just because you changed.
Just because you've upgraded your SSL key,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not your It's not your emergency room shotgun
Correct.
room type issue on there. But I do think that eventually when you're in a very competitive marketplace, in a very competitive SEO space, those are the kind of the things you look for to get that extra edge.
Exactly.
On that.
Yes, agreed.
All right, last one. Kevin, you ready? Number 3, schema markup will evolve to distinguish content that is better suited for voice searches.
Believe it. I personally have to say this is something that I just personally believe. I don't have much evidence for that, but anecdotally, I had so much success in using schema markup or markup in general with things like knowledge panels or, just make it easier for search engines to really understand what is what on our sites or on other sites. I could see that this becoming, a factor because it's very complicated actually to bridge that gap between a user using voice search and that kind of old school information retrieval where, you try to extract text from a page. So I think that disconnect can be easier solved with schema, and that's why I say believe it.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think you're a device fan. What device do you have at home, Robert?
I have Google Home, and then I have Google Assistant on my phone.
Okay, so Google Home, I think, is not great at answering questions like, what is the temperature going to be at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning? It knows what the temperature is going to be tomorrow,
Right.
but it doesn't know what the temperature is going to be at 7 o'clock. But it has that data somewhere, and I just don't think it's been marked up to know that this is something that people will frequently ask about, that by the hour data as opposed to by the day data on that. So I would definitely agree with you. I think that is something that's going to happen for sure.
Let's give them number 4 since we have it.
All right, we're going to throw a bonus round. Bonus round, Kevin. Number 4, the single most important SEO technique for B2B marketers is to understand how their prospects express the problem they are trying to solve.
Better believe it. Better believe it. Absolutely. I mean, that's basically what we spoke about, the last 60 minutes. So, everything's being said.
Yeah, that's the key, right? It's the key takeaway for today. SEO can be really, really complex, and I think sometimes in the show we make it complex, but if you got to distill it down to one thing, if you're a B2B marketer, you got to first understand what is the problem that your prospects are trying to solve. If you can't get that,
and where they're at,
and everything else really is not going to matter until you get your hands around that issue.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, time for the tattoo.
All right, Kevin, we got just a few minutes left, and the audience is looking for your simplest, most succinct, most impactful piece of advice. Got to be tattooable, because remember, Robert gets all these tattoos. What should they walk away this show remembering?
Okay, so here's my take. If you want to tattoo something crazy on your chest or on your forehead or whatever you want.
Left butt cheek. No, I'm kidding.
Left butt. Living la vida loca. No, I'm just kidding. So here's my take. You should take the DIKW pyramid. So what is that? The DIKW pyramid is a pyramid of 4 components, and it stands for data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And so the idea is that the basis of that pyramid is data. The next level is information. The next higher level is knowledge, and the highest level is wisdom. And what it says is that I think very often, and I fell into this trap myself, we as marketers try to justify everything with data and just rely on data. But data in itself is actually not helpful, right? Data, has to be put together and processed and interpreted into information. And then with a lot of information, you have a lot of knowledge. And then with more knowledge, you get to wisdom, right? And I think it's just my statement of saying, don't blindly follow data or question it, think about it, think what it actually means. Merge it with anecdotes in your own experience.
That's good.
So the tattoo is the DIKW. That's what Robert's going to get tattooed. DIKW.
Yes.
Okay, people will think that's like a hip clothing brand that you've all of a sudden embraced.
Yeah, Kevin, I want to thank you for being on the show. It's been a real honor. Lots of great information you gave.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Guys, thanks again for listening to the show again. And Kevin, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Can you give us, if somebody wants to reach out to you on Twitter or how can they do that?
Yeah, sure. So you find all my social profiles on kevin-indig.com, but you also just Google for the name Kevin Indig with a G at the end. It should be fairly unique. Or on Twitter, it's @Kevin_Indig.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much, man.
All right, guys.
Take care.
Another great show this week. Next week, we have to do our research. Our guest next week, you really need to research. Pam Weber. He's like, what?
All right, Pam's going to talk about local search, and there is a lot happening in the local search space.
Yes.
You know, there's probably 2 or 3 new features that Google My Business has added that 95% of the businesses out there are not using, and you'll find out about them next week.
Yes. Be sure go to Spreaker, that's SPREAKER.com, and follow us there. You can get every episode from beginning to end. Like I said, we're coming up on our 100th episode January. So tune in for that. Should be a special event. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for your support, guys.
All right, thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Search Talk Live is sponsored by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
Find the true value of your home when you log on. HomeValue.com.
If you have questions for Search Talk Live, or you're interested in being a guest or a sponsor of the show, email Robert at searchtalklive.com. That's searchtalklive.com.